Are your ulcerative colitis symptoms proving difficult to manage? Tremfya guselkumab can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. At 1 year, many patients taking Tremfya achieved clinical remission, and some patients also achieved endoscopic remission. Individual results may vary. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Ask your doctor if Tremfya can help you manage the cycle of UC symptoms. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more, or visit tremfyaradio.com.
There are so many people who are local news publishers who might have found their way into this intentionally, or might have sort of found themselves filling a need for their community, and accidental entrepreneurs, and that's just amazing and wonderful. And it can also be really isolating being in that kind of space and feeling like you're the only one who sees things differently. And just know that there are other people out there like you, and this community exists.
This is Small Press, Big Ideas, a podcast about the business of local news in the United States. I'm your host, Paul Gewertz. Small Press, Big Ideas is about the opportunities and challenges that local news publishers are facing for their businesses. I'll sit down and talk with journalists, entrepreneurs, nonprofit leaders, and more in the local news industry to find out what's working, what isn't, and how the local news ecosystem can innovate and flourish in the 21st century. In the podcast, I'm joined by Karolle Rabarison and Meghan Murphy from the Online News Association. Karolle is the Director of Communications, and Meghan is the Director of Programs over at the ONA. And the Online News Association, for anybody listening not aware, is the world's largest digital journalism association. Their mission is to inspire and support innovation and excellence in digital journalism. So, Meghan and Karolle, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate finally getting this thing put together.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
No problem. So just real quick, and I'm actually curious about this, to hear it from I've kind of read on the website, but I'm curious to hear from you also. I was wondering if one or both of you could just give me a brief history of the ONA, like when and who founded it, and dive maybe a little deeper into the mission of the organization for the audience.
Yeah, so ONA is all about supporting journalists and newsrooms to thrive in the digital world, and building a strong community of people who really have that mindset of focusing on what's next. And it got its starts in the late 90s when a group of journalists sort of saw the internet was starting to transform how news was produced and consumed. And at that time, a lot of people in newspapers and broadcast news are highly, highly skeptical. There wasn't a professional organization that was really focused on supporting the people that were dabbling with things online. Some of those early members are a mix of veteran journalists whose peers were thinking, "What are you doing? You're taking a huge risk in your career in sort of focusing on building out websites." And then the other side was the people who were earlier in their career, and they identified as misfits in their organizations because they were really true believers and saw that this quote unquote online news thing was going to be a thing. And they were pioneering different forms of storytelling with video, with photos, different multimedia galleries, tools, later on, even like live discussions online. So I think for a lot of people, this was just weird. Like this isn't news. So in those early days, one of the big challenges was building credibility, and that's part of that. That was like a big reason why ONA existed. And then later on, it was more navigating social media platforms. And then fast forward to today, it's looking at opportunities around AI or supporting some of the independent journalists who've made the leap out of newsrooms into the creator economy, and supporting in the different ways that they're experimenting with connecting with their community. So through all of that, the membership, like we say, it's the world's largest organization of digital journalists. It's so diverse in terms of newsroom roles and expertise. There are audience people, there are product people, there are freelance reporters. It's all kinds of people. But what really ties everyone together is this motivation to embrace what's next and figuring out what are the opportunities to strengthen the value that journalism brings, even when there's a lot of disruption and change, especially on the technology front.
That's great. Isn't it funny that it seemed that it needed like legitimacy back then? Like in hindsight, it seems like a foregone conclusion that everything would go digital, but it's just funny.
No, not at all. Yeah. And a few years ago, we were working on, when we were marking ONA's 20th anniversary, Meghan and I spent some time reconnecting with some of our early members and trying to look more into the history of ONA, because it wasn't really documented. It was just people in weird jobs getting together and like just trying things. And we found that at some point, maybe a couple years into it, someone had commissioned a study that looked into whether online news was credible. And the press releases around it, I think the headline was literally "Online news found to be credible."
Mm-hmm.
That's great. That's hilarious. I might have to pull that up and put it in like my kind of summary of this on the post. Yeah. That's great.
We'll send it to you. We have that link. I just pulled it up for somebody recently, actually. Yeah. Yeah. It was a big deal. A lot of people felt like it was a fad, and we joke about it now because it's, like you said, it's so obvious, but it really did feel revolutionary to be thinking, this is something that we should be paying attention to. This is something that our audiences care about and that they'll trust. This isn't just a place for cat videos, although cat videos are an excellent part of the internet. It's something that I really enjoy, but there's also room for a lot more.
Yeah, I was looking
Megan's
at cat
lying.
videos.
She's a dog person.
I'm both.
Me too. I was showing cat videos to my boys last night to keep them entertained for a minute, so I get it. I was wondering if each of you could kind of tell me how you came to work at the ONA, kind of a bit of your personal story, and just kind of what your day-to-day looks like also. Whoever wants to go first, I'd love to hear that story also.
Sure, I can go first. Well, so I did go to journalism school and I worked at our student newspaper, and I found out pretty quickly that I just wasn't going to be a reporter. I had lots of friends who would be, sprinting out of the newsroom at the first rumor of breaking news, and that was just never really me. But I did love the functionality of, and the role that journalism plays in communities. I've always been a person who, when I see a problem, I'm not necessarily, my first instinct isn't necessarily to write about it. It's to get the right people in the room together to solve it. Like figure out who needs to be at the table to work on this together. And I didn't know if there was a role like that in journalism, like a space for that kind of thing. But that was my degree. And so I ended up kind of working my way into some big media organizations when I was living in DC, and sort of accidentally found my way into what's now called audience engagement. I was working at National Geographic and started working with the very tiny nascent social media team there at the time, and discovered this thing called community management or community engagement. And I was like, that is what I want to do. And we need that here. We need somebody who's looking at how we're connecting our members better with the mission, with the people at this organization, the scientists and the explorers and the photographers, and with each other, and working together better. And I want to do that. So I pitched that role. I had some really great mentors there who were very supportive. I moved over to AARP, so another big media organization doing really similar work there. And then I heard about this job for a community manager at this organization called ONA that I didn't really know that much about at the time yet. But people kept sending me the role and saying, ONA is such a great organization. This role looks amazing. It looks like it was written for you. You should really go talk to them. So that's how I ended up coming over. That was just over 9 years ago now. And the first event that I attended, the first ONA event that I attended, was actually as a staffer. We did an audience engagement event that spring. And it was, my mind was blown. It was like, these are the people who have been, they're thinking the same way that I am. They're thinking the same weird things about how we could be doing this better. I feel like I've been, just banging my head into the wall. I'm the only one who feels like this in the organizations that I've been working in. And these people are doing it, and they're 100 times smarter than me about it. And it was like, these are my people, And so over the past 9 years, I've heard variations on that story from so many people in our community. I showed up to an ONA event and I thought, where have these people been all my life? And so I always want to have our members feel that way too. So in terms of the day-to-day, since you asked about that too, I guess for your listeners, my role isn't really that much different from an editor. So I'm looking at what are the stories, what are the issues that that people working in journalism need to understand better right now, that our members need to understand better right now? Who are the experts who are leading the way? What do we need to learn from them? What are the solutions that people are exploring? And how can we get those some more oxygen and get more people working on those? So my job as program director is all about developing that narrative strategy and then bringing it to life. So engaging the right partners and funders, identifying and working with experts, getting all those right folks in the room to solve the problem together, designing gatherings to help them learn and also connect with each other better, to collaborate, and also doing, the data analysis and the reporting and looking at what stories we need to be examining next. So that's my mishmash of what's going on, what's going across my desk day to day.
That's awesome. How about you, Carol? How'd you come into your position? What's it look like?
So I joined ONA in 2017, and this was at a time when I was intent on going deeper into what I sometimes jokingly, but also very seriously call as my democracy defender era. But my formal training is in economics, not journalism. So I never went to journalism school. And I spent some of my early years working on international development programs and working as a consultant in the education space. But I'd always been fascinated. I'd always been a little bit of a news nerd and identified as being very online. And I was doing these other jobs, but I was taking up side hustles, just producing and editing content online, different online magazines or aka blogs. So during the day, I'd be doing research or writing proposals for things like rice cultivation. And then come 5 p.m., I'll commute on the train, head back to my apartment. And that was around the time when the East Coast workday would start up, and I would get online and I would spend the next few hours building out social media accounts, curating content for different websites, or it was work that helped me make a little extra money to travel as a young, 20-something abroad who wanted to do things, wanted to do more stuff on the weekends and get out and about. But I also mostly did it because it was just really fun and exciting. I was fascinated with just all the different ways that people were sharing and accessing information online. So fast forward a bit, I ended up working on some programs that are specifically focused on getting people internet access. And the more I did that, the more I also became disturbed with what the information was looking at online. And if you match that with the context, especially in the US, of what was happening, 2016 going into 2017, you can imagine why my brain was kind of exploding. I just started going deeper into that intersection with like civic engagement, access to information, journalism, democracy, and interviewed for a lot of different kinds of jobs. But enter ONA took me into the fold. It just the mission really resonated with me, really more than a lot of other things that I saw. It's like, I think they might be my people. And when I joined the team, I was looking around and I was like, these people have journalism backgrounds. I didn't identify as a journalist. Really found my place in the fold. Day-to-day at ONA, part of my job, and my title is Director of Communications, which can mean a lot of different things, but part of my job sort of on the organization side is making sure that we're reaching the right people with our programs, understanding what they need, and engaging them in different ways, and bringing more of these people who might be alone in their newsrooms, maybe a small local outlet in New Mexico or, a larger organization on the East Coast that they're just trying different things that they don't quite feel like they have other people who are thinking about the same questions and the same problems. Finding those people and bringing them into the community, connecting them to each other. Sort of on a broader scope, my role has given me like a really unique perspective into how ONA works, because I work across the team since I work on our comms. But it's also given me a broader view of the ecosystem really of support that's available for journalists and journalists and technologists both. So building a deep understanding of that and figuring out, if someone is looking for something, a resource, a connection, a collaborator, maybe it's not even at ONA that they're looking for that, just wanting to make sure that they can find those resources and connect them.
I think it speaks very highly to the organization that both of you sounds so passionate. It's like a gravitational pull pulled you both into the place. It's funny, both of you kind of in your answers remind. I have a friend named Johnny Levy, who's been on this podcast. He runs a company called Data Joe, and he runs this group that I'm a part of called the Media Data Collaborative. It's like just an online media of innovators in local news. And he refers to himself as a super connector. That's what he says, like his kind of how he views his role is like connecting all the different people and just making intros. And there's like a touch of that kind of with both your stories, which is super interesting and kind of speaks to the role of it. Yeah.
There's probably some archived page on my defunct website when I was in my 20s at some point where in my bio identified myself as a cross-pollinator.
There you go. I like that.
Not anymore, but
I always sort of I feel like I've not really leaned into or not really understood what a skill that is, because it's always just sort of like, I love surrounding myself with people who are like that too, who are connective. And when I came to ONA, one thing that really struck me was that I never had to make the case to people for the value of connecting our members with each other and building community like that. Everybody got it. Everybody just got it on the staff. It really struck me.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
You've had a chance to really like pitch something, and Meghan and I can talk for 2 hours about a new idea, and then just like she can run with it, and people get why that's important.
Very cool. All right. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. So, okay, my next question I had down was, so AI, it somehow comes up in every single episode I have of this podcast, it feels like lately. I even implemented it in my workflow and my business a lot also. But anyway, AI has been seemingly everywhere over the last couple of years, obviously, to anybody, including the journalism world. And I know that the ONA launched an AI in journalism initiative last year and are planning, it sounds like, on expanding it this year. So I'm just wondering if you could take a crack at just telling me what last year's program looked like, that initial journalism initiative, and then what it's going to look like expanding it this year. I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, you're right. It is everywhere. Everybody's been talking about it in the space. And I think for ONA, we really were looking at the history of even the organization and our community and how we've missed opportunities before because we haven't taken things seriously. And so when we launched this initiative, we were really aiming to get more conversation going at a high level in news organizations and with journalists around the world, getting people to explore this and understand it better and take it seriously. And, I think we've seen what's happened when we haven't done that before, but this technology is moving so much faster. And so, we were hearing some very good concerns from people about the investment of time and energy and space, especially in smaller organizations, to explore this well, and feeling like, kind of maybe we should take more of a wait and see approach. And we're very concerned that we were going to let this moment pass us by, because this is happening. This is changing the way that people interact with information. You can already see it just on your phone, on your computer, as a consumer of information and a user of the internet. You can see it everywhere. And we want journalists to be in front of that, at the forefront, figuring out how we can ethically and effectively use this technology, and where it can't, where it doesn't stand up yet to what we need it to and what our communities need. And so we launched the initiative last year with a real focus on just getting people to take it seriously and to think about it and to explore it and understand how it works better and how it doesn't work, and to connect with other people outside of their organizations who were thinking in similar ways. So we focused heavily on practical training, getting people to experiment with the tools and check them out, and giving people space to play, and community connections too. So that was our big focus for last year. We had incredible 2,800 people representing over 1,500 organizations engaged with the program in 2024, which is very cool. So we're definitely seeing a lot of hunger. A lot of those folks too would attend multiple trainings, or they would attend multiple trainings and then attend a summit, or they'd, sign up to get case studies of AI use in newsroom from us. And so lots of people are engaging in several different ways, which is really cool. So coming into this year, we still wanted to have that kind of pipeline for people to get engaged if they haven't yet, to learn. We want to have those opportunities open to people. So we're continuing that practical training, but we're also hearing from people who are sort of on board and thinking about this and realizing the impacts that this is going to have for their communities, that there are still often only the one of only a couple of people maybe in their newsroom, or sometimes the only one, who are thinking about this. And so we're really focusing this year on helping those folks bring their teams along, and people across their organizations. How can they, build systems and communication channels and get people thinking about this more broadly across teams? This can't just be something for the editorial folks or the technologists. Everybody needs to understand it, from business to audience engagement to, revenue and operations and editorial and product and design, all across the newsroom. And so the people who get it are our best way to make that happen, we think. So that's been our big push for this year in developing new programs, is sort of giving those folks the resources that they need, and learning from some of the folks who were on the front lines of doing this before are doing this again with AI. So how did it work before? How can we build on this and really take advantage of this opportunity this window of opportunity that we have right now as an industry to get it right?
That's a fun point, because when you're saying some of the people that were doing this before with other platforms or other tools are doing it now, the people that are engaging with this AI initiative are like really awesome mix of people who are just getting started and playing with things, and people who are in executive leadership roles within these organizations, which is really cool, is to get really all along the line thinking about what's happening with this technology.
Yeah,
for sure.
It is moving so fast. And it's funny, just when you were talking before, Meghan, they say history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And I couldn't help but thinking, I'm not necessarily saying this is the case, but there's a world where, you're like, we're trying to get people to take it seriously. Like earlier in the conversation, when you're like, online news can be taken seriously. It's like, Is this that moment again? Is it in 20 years? Like, yeah, duh, of course, we should have been doing that. And, it definitely has its downfalls, as you said. It's definitely not perfect, but it's just increased my workflow so much personally, and even like my personal life. I'll go into ChatGPT and be like, I have these ingredients and I have really angry toddlers. What can I make that they will actually touch? And it'll give me like a recipe, and it works sometimes.
That is a hot tip for your listeners.
Yeah, for anybody with toddlers out there, it helps. It's not 100% even there, trust me. But, it'll give you some quality stuff. So in your roles, as we kind of said, I called you super connectors, you called yourself cross-pollinators, Carol. In terms of AI, what are you hearing from members in regard, like down any repeating, like actual exact use cases people are really looking into that come up over and over again? I'm just curious. Like, is there a specific thing that you've just seen repeatedly, or is it just kind of all over the board? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. I would say that in the beginning, we're definitely seeing a lot of people who are kind of doing the basics. So they're doing things like looking at transcription and translation and things like that, tools to do that kind of work.
Drafting headlines.
Yes.
Improving SEO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Where I think that we're seeing, I've heard from so many people, well, I don't want it to write my articles for me. And that's a totally legitimate line to draw. And I think, lots of organizations will see that line move as the technology gets better. But, lots of organizations, some organizations are experimenting with that and some aren't. But that's kind of the first thing that everybody goes to is like, well, I don't want it doing actual user facing or, audience facing work, or, that's my job. And that's a good conversation to have, depending on the need in the newsroom and things like that. What I worry about is that people stop there a lot of the time, and they're like, well, either that or they're only thinking about the workflow, like you were saying, meal planning types of functions, or time saving, taking from meetings and agenda development and stuff like that, which is also very cool. I've been seeing definitely a lot of people who are using it for thought partnerships. So for things like developing strategy, or even like pitch development for freelancers, or job interviewing, like doing mock interviews and sort of role playing and things like that for interviews, which is really interesting. And then, so those are some really easy ways to do it that don't take a ton of development, that can kind of get you used to how the tools work. Where I've been really interested is in hearing from organizations where they've really been able to make a huge difference with this technology is on data analysis and research and parsing information.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
so there's an organization that we had a session with back in the spring called iTromsa, who's in Norway. They're great, just awesome people, very, very smart, very dedicated to the journalism work. And they've been able to build some really amazing tools to help to support their reporters in parsing public documents and identifying stories that need to be told. And that allows them to focus more on source development and relationship building and meaning making and things like that. And so a couple of things. One is that they've talked about how their journalists can now come in and basically have like ready to go a handful of story ideas that are coming out of public document analysis that this tool is doing for them, and they can just start calling sources immediately when they get to their desk and working on the story, versus having to download hundreds of PDFs and be trying to sort through. But another super interesting thing that this has allowed them to do is to bring in different expertise to beats and subject issues that are impacting their communities that traditionally take a lot of expertise and onboarding for people to cover. So they can have, a say like an environmental reporter or a health reporter be engaging with something like urban development that, you really need to kind of have a while on that beat to understand the key players traditionally and where the stories are and what the issues are that people care about. And the systems that they've been able to build have helped kind of onboard people to that a lot more easily and made it so that they can improve the depth of the coverage and the perspective, bring in new perspectives to the coverage from reporters that can collaborate with people who have been on the beat for a longer time, which is really interesting. Just thinking about that kind of impact at the organizational level, and the tool that they're producing, that they made, it doesn't produce anything that faces the audience. It's just supporting the reporters, and it was built with journalists. Like journalists built it, so they know what they needed.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing things like that really gets me excited about the potential here for and especially for local. This is a very small local newsroom, to kind of like even the playing field a little bit for some, with some of these very big, heavily resourced newsrooms.
Local news needs new revenue streams, and my company, localpod.co, makes it easy and affordable. Our entry-level offering transforms your written content into high-quality audio and monetizes it with programmatic ads, all with zero extra work on your end. Think of it as a plug-and-play podcast solution for publishers. And if and when you're ready, we'll help you stair-step your podcast feed up to even more content, whether that's in-depth investigative reporting, interviews with community leaders, or whatever ideas you may have. You keep reporting, we help you turn it into new revenue. So you can get started at localpod.co, link in the show notes, or click the link in the show notes to set up a call with us today and learn more. Okay, back to the episode. I couldn't agree more. And, this show is kind of aimed at the local news ecosystem. And that's, I just agree, just things I've been seeing pop up. That's just adding muscle that they couldn't afford before. Just, the tedious stuff on the back end. It's a super helpful tool for just kind of grinding through a lot of that stuff. You maybe would have had to have a couple interns sift through before or whatever. And then, you can go fact check it or whatever. Agree. And then on terms of the not audience facing, which is probably a good thing, right at this stage of AI, a new term I just heard the other day on another podcast is news slop. I'm not sure if you've heard that. It's like a lot of these auto-generated like hyper-local newsletters that literally just completely, and that's what it's being called, is news slop. It's just like you read it, you're like, what is this? This is of no use to me.
I feel the effect.
Yeah, exactly. So so this is definitely not there yet. I don't know that it ever will be able to go directly to audience without, at least being fact-checked or looked at by a human. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, were you going to say something, Carol? You had another example?
Yeah, on the hyperlocal front, you're mentioning hyperlocal. I was thinking of another example. of the city, which is a nonprofit newsroom in New York. They were finalists in the Online Journalism Awards last year, and they've been around for about 4 years. They have a lot of hyper-local coverage of different neighborhoods, and part of the mission is really to serve New Yorkers across all of these neighborhoods. And so they used AI to kind of really audit themselves and check, hey, we've been around for 4 years. Are we actually covering these different boroughs, these different areas of the city? So they built a tool. They used ChatGPT to like process all of these the stories, the coverage that they've done the past 4 years, and then visualize, kind of overlay that with Google Maps data and visualize where the pattern of coverage is, so they can see, okay, we're talking about this community a lot more. We're representing this other space a lot more. Hey, there's a huge gap here. What's happening there? Like, what stories might be there? Who is missing from our overall work? And I think that's really good.
That's super cool. Yeah, I haven't heard of anything like that. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool creative use or creative idea too. I'd love to see like the results of that. Good tip for other publishers out there. That's great. We
can send you the link to that too, Paul.
Oh, thank you so much.
It's on our website because they were a finalist for our awards program last year, like Carol said. So we can send you a link to, like, they talk about the project in their entry.
Very, very cool. Yeah, I've got a lot. I have a lot to sift through after this talk for sure. It's good stuff. That's a good thing. Okay, we can get off of AI for a minute. That's super fascinating. I kind of joke that it comes up on every episode. Like, I was annoyed before, but it is the thing that's happening in the world right now. So it demands a lot of attention to it. But you are also, sounds like, ramping up efforts in 2025 around two areas, and that is climate and resilience, climate reporting and resilience. I'm guessing just in journalism in general. I'd love to hear more about that. Any specific initiatives, what that kind of means to the organization, and what that looks like for 2025.
Yeah, sure. So, like I was saying earlier, we're kind of looking in the same way that an editor might at what are the big stories, the big issues that our community needs to be talking about this year? How can O&A convene, industry level conversations about these big issues? And so AI, like you said, is of course one of them. It's huge. It's impacting every area of the business. So we're looking at two more for 2025, like you said. The first one is climate. Just it's the issue of our time, right? I mean, it impacts every beat, every part of the business, and it's a story that our communities really, they desperately need us to help them make sense of it. There's a lot of amazing work out there already that we want to help lift up. And also in terms of reporting and the stories that newsrooms are telling about climate, but also we want to look at what are the impacts of climate change on other aspects of the journalism business of our organizations. So how do we need to shore up our operations and our processes in the face of more climate disasters in our community and emergency situations? How can journalism be a part of that kind of fabric of community organizations that are supporting communities before and during and after those disasters? What are the ways that communities can get involved and make change around this issue? It's something that people really, really care about. And, how are we connecting them to resources and to ways to get involved? What are the new products and tools that we can build to get people more connected and informed about climate? And how can we engage our audiences more effectively on this issue? So we want to explore all of these different areas this year with our community. The second one, like you said, is resilience. So this is a really broad one. There's a lot of different ways to think about this. And I think a lot of times at least, at the industry level, we bring up resilience in terms of organizational resilience, sustainability, revenue, operations. But so that's certainly part of it. We need these healthy journalism ecosystems to serve communities, but also we want to explore, as part of this theme, can and should be a part of building resilience in the communities we serve. That really ties into the climate thing a lot, but there are lots of other aspects of resilience in communities, and thinking about the evolving role of journalism in that ecosystem for communities. I would posit that it's not just publishing articles anymore. There's a lot more that journalism organizations are doing to support that. And then also kind of going down to the micro level, to the individual level of people working in journalism right now. To put it bluntly, this is a really difficult time to be a journalist. It just is, And so how are we making journalism a career where people can grow and thrive and learn? And, how can we build pathways in and out of journalism into other areas of expertise? Bringing in new voices and new ways of thinking about things. How can we, support this growing movement of people who are moving into independent creatorship, or who are found themselves, starting a local TikTok or, Substack or newsletter or something like that, and suddenly they're a journalist because they're filling an information need in their community. We're seeing tons of people come up in the climate space around that, and it was really. There was a lot of conversation around it with the LA wildfires a couple months ago of just, citizens who were going live on social media and giving people hyper-local, up-to-date climate information that saved lives. And, so how can we support the people doing that really important work in communities and bring them into this world and connect them with resources and connections and other people
take them seriously.
And have people take them seriously. Yeah. Again, it kind of goes
theme.
back to that.
It's a theme on this episode.
Right. Exactly. It's our board president calls it the little green Martians, where you feel like you're the only person doing something. You feel like you're the only one thinking this way. And there's lots of other people doing this. So how can we connect them with each other better so they can get those supports too? So yeah, you can probably tell there's lots of intersection between those three focus areas. There's lots of kind of things that I kind of think of it like a Venn diagram. And so this year, we have a lot of AI programming that's still going from last year that we're building on, and partnerships there. And so now we're looking at building up more programming around climate and resilience too, developing those partnerships and hearing from ONA members about what they're working on. And some of that is writing and talking about it, and some of it is sessions and case studies that we have in the works. So yeah, we've got a lot more to come this spring on all of that. And right now, as we're recording this, we just opened our suggestion box for our annual conference, which is happening in September this year in New Orleans. And those will be the three kind of areas of focus that we center the program around this year. So looking at those AI, climate, and resilience from the lens of all of these different areas of practice that our community is in. So audience engagement and leadership and technology and product and, all of these different ways that that the work that we do day to day in this industry intersects with those three focus areas. So we're taking pitches now. We're also taking pitches for virtual sessions, and we're working on a lot of those. So yeah, we've got a lot coming up.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, thanks for expanding on that, because, you'd said that you're focusing on resilience, and even when I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, well, that could mean a lot of things, but you did a really good job of summing it up, because it does mean a lot of things, and it's a really cool area of focus. You also touched on ONA 25 in New Orleans. I also kind of wanted to hear about that. Just your conferences in general. I know you have an annual conference. I'd love to hear what those entail, what goes on there, and then also specifically this year's in ONA 25 in New Orleans. What do those look like?
Meghan covered a little bit of what I was going to share. So I mentioned earlier how the ONA community is really diverse in terms of has grown to be really diverse in terms of expertise over the years. So those three things that Meghan was talking about, AI, climate, resilience, we're going to be exploring those across different areas of practice. And I'm going to put my comms hat on and rattle these off. Because
pop quiz.
And I'm gonna get this wrong now that I've prefaced it. But there are really 6 areas of practice that sort of cross-cutting that we're going to be exploring throughout the different sessions, whether it's sort of the standard 60-minute learning session or deeper dive workshops that we're offering, but that's bookending the conference. So we're going to be looking at, from the perspective of leadership and strategy and newsroom culture. So that would be 1, technology and product that Meghan mentioned. That would be 2. Also looking at folks who are doing the reporting and editing piece, the revenue side, audience development side, and then finally these people who are independent creators or entrepreneurs like yourself, actually, who are building out their own channels and their own space. And I think I lost my train of thought because Meghan already said it. The LA wildfire.
Sorry.
This is why we should not spend 5 hours on the phone, because our thoughts started to meld. And I was like, I was going to give the example of the wildfires. And like, wait a minute, she literally just said that. Okay, cut.
That's all good. No, it's great.
But I'm really excited to get back to New Orleans. We were in New Orleans in 2019 for our 20th anniversary, and it was just so great to like every conference, like people describe it kind of like a summer camp. Every conference feels like, wow, I'm with my people, and you're meeting new people, because about half of the attendees each year, like year to year, are new. And some people go every year, and some people kind of sort of like go every other year. So you're meeting new people, or you're finding old friends, and there's always that vibe of, hey, what's next? Like, what are you working on? And just trying to have like a really positive and clear-eyed view about these big sticky conversations that we're having. But it's also fun, and bringing people back to New Orleans. This is just my personal take, but that was our 20th anniversary conference. It was a big celebration. We had early members come. We had new members come. It was before everything shut down for COVID. In my mind, it's just like, this is going to be a party. So I think people should come for that light bulb moment, for the networking and that new connection, but also like really enjoy the city. Get to know the city, get to know the region, connect with people who are working in this region and learn from them. So yeah.
I'll say I've been to New Orleans since the pandemic, and it's still pretty awesome. I had a great time. Yeah, that sounds really enticing. Connect with all the people, dive into everything, and there's the French Quarter and beignets. I'd be there just for that. With the powdered sugar on top and everything. Yeah,
can't go wrong. Really.
No, definitely not.
Yeah. I'll say too that, for local, a lot of my work at ONA has been working with small and local newsrooms. And I know that a lot of the time it's a big proposition to go to a conference from a small newsroom, not only because of the travel expense and things like that, but also the time away from your desk and in a organization that's stretched really thin. And I'll just say that, we have a ton of resources. And like Carol said earlier, across the industry, there's tons and tons of resources that people can access virtually and throughout the year and kind of on demand. And that's awesome. That's definitely a great thing to have. I will say that being in person and having that kind of, being in the room and being able to like devote the mental space to a conversation that's happening right in front of you is really important. And then also being able to turn to the person next to you after that conversation is over and say, what did you think about this? I have a question about what they said about this. Have you experienced this? Or even just the hallway conversations, like running into people outside in the hallway, and continuing those conversations. There's something really kind of magical about having all of these people who care so deeply about journalism all in this same physical space and kind of like interacting with and bouncing off of each other. There's an energy that's really cool. So, it's a kind of, it's definitely not the only way to engage with these conversations that are happening. There's lots of ways to engage, but it is a really special energy to be a part of. And again, New Orleans, I mean, come on.
Yeah,
it's a great place.
Yeah, I agree. In person, everything's gotten more and more virtual in the last couple of years. Obviously, as we talked, I think we were talking before the podcast about that, before I started recording. But the serendipity just at the in-person events is always, every time I go to a conference, no matter what it's about, it's every time, you turn to talk to somebody after a presentation, and it's like, oh, you do this? That's amazing. That's so cool. And yeah, just that serendipity is really great. Okay, we're running up on time. Actually, probably going over time, but that's all right. I'd love to hear how can the listeners get involved with ONA if this is their first time hearing about it, they're new to the space, or otherwise, if they've been in for a while and haven't looked into it before.
Yeah, so I won't put my comms hat on and rattle off everything that we're doing, but I'm thinking of three ways. One is a really easy step. We have a Slack community that we maintain, so you can hop into the ONA Slack. You can find it at journalist.org/Slack. Introduce yourself, meet people doing similar work. There's a channel in there that's called Ask, where you can pop in and ask a question about a tool that maybe you're struggling with or trying out, or you're looking for a recommendation for a consultant or feedback on a project, that kind of thing. So that's really easy. Get in there, pop in and out anytime throughout the day, the year. Two would be, we have a lot of programming that's already on the calendar for our virtual sessions. So these are a mix of training sessions and also networking events. So check out our calendar, come to one of those. Or if you have something that you're really itching to share with this community or like co-host a discussion with us about, pitch one and, reach out to us and pitch one. And we'll sort of like work through that and set it up and bring people in. And third, of course, is come in person to New Orleans for the beignet.
I'm getting more convinced by the minute. It sounds really awesome right now. And I don't think my toddlers could come either. I think they might have to stay here with grandma and grandpa or something.
It depends on whether or not you want them to come.
I mean, I will say there are people who have brought their kids on site.
Yeah.
Babies and toddlers and make it a trip. But I know for some other parents, it's the chance to get away, sleep, have dinner without cleaning up.
That's what conference season is for me, for sure.
Right.
But yeah.
A vacation.
Yeah, a little bit. Any words of wisdom or final thoughts that we didn't touch on for like local publishers in particular out there going into 2025? It doesn't have to be anything too groundbreaking or anything, but anything there?
This is a really busy time to be in the journalism space. And there are so many people who, like you said, are local news publishers who might have found their way into this intentionally or might have sort of found themselves filling a need for their community and, accidental entrepreneurs. And that's just amazing and wonderful. And it can also be really isolating being in that kind of space and feeling like you're the only one who sees things differently. And just know that there are other people out there like you and this community exists. And I think that people are often surprised by the spirit of generosity among people who are in this kind of role. People have been there before. So lots of times if you reach out to somebody through, LinkedIn or send them a podcast invitation or, whatever it is. People are really eager to talk and to share and to share their connections and their networks and their insights and to hear from you and learn from you. And so I think a lot of the time, people hear somebody doing something interesting on a podcast like this, or they hear about a cool project that they want to learn about and they're afraid to reach out and ask. And my advice is always just go ahead and do it. You've got nothing to lose. And people are so generous of spirit because they, like I say, they've been there. They know what it's like, and they're happy to hear from you too. And to meet somebody else who gets it. So yeah, that's always my. It's not necessarily surprised knowing the community, but it's always just such an amazing gift to be able to work with people who are so generous of spirit. So go for that. And if there's any way that we can help you make a connection or help you meet somebody new, we're always happy to do that.
Yeah, and we've done some of that. Hey, I'm curious about that. I think that happened actually very recently. Like some of our programming is we see a project. I'm just doing my very online internet thing, reading the internet late at night, and I think, oh, that's a really cool project. I wonder, and reaching out and saying, hey, maybe it'd be really cool if you shared this with the ONA community. So we've had that experience as well. And I think over time, really internalized, like just how generous this community is and how much people are willing to work together on solutions. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'll echo all of that. I totally agree. I had like zero connection to local journalism or any journalism really like a little over a year ago, and I started this podcast. I've met some of the coolest people, and like it's such a collaborative, like welcoming space. And yeah, reach out like you said. I was just listening to a different podcast, not in the journalism space, yesterday, and I think one of the hosts said, like the most interesting and like most interesting people in the world are one cold email away. So don't be afraid to. But most people never make that leap to reach out or anything.
Great.
So great stuff. Where can people find you both individually and anything else you'd like me to link to in the show notes where people can find ONA or Meghan or Carol?
I own Karolle.com, but it is not.
Really?
Yeah, because my name was so unique. It took me many years of being online to get that because for some reason somebody had bought it. Fighting for domains. Yeah. So these days I can send you my LinkedIn. My LinkedIn, I think, like my profile is just /IN/Karolle. It's just my name. I'm not super active on my personal accounts in other places. I've been increasingly active on LinkedIn the past couple of years, and
I'm a fan. I like LinkedIn
in a surprising way, and that's how you found me.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're not alone. It's been interesting. Like, people have been reaching out to me from other parts of like previous chapters of my life that I haven't heard from in a very long time, and it was like happy to hear from. I don't know if maybe the algorithm is doing something. So I'm active there, but also just on email.
Okay. Yeah, and I can link to all that and everything. How about you, Meghan?
Yeah, same. I'm mostly active these days on LinkedIn, and just it's been a really interesting place for conversations and for connecting with new people too. I agree. And yeah, an email too is a great way to reach out, and would love to hear from folks.
Awesome. I will link to all that, and also link to the Online News Association website. And if I can find the link for the conference in NOLA this year also, I will add that as well.
I'll send you.
You're both selling me on that. I feel like I need to get some beignets in my life.
No.
And some crawfish.
No pressure. No pressure.
Reminded me of something else I forgot to ask also. When you were talking about the Slack, the ONA Slack, do you need to be like approved to get in there? Do you need to be a journalist? Can you just join? Is it open to I was curious about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. The Slack is open to anyone who's interested in digital media. We do have paying members. We have an annual membership, and members help support our work. But a lot of our programs and our resources are open to anybody, so you can sign up.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, because I wanted to touch on that. Well, Meghan, Karolle, thank you so much. This was awesome. I feel like we could keep talking for a while, but I need to shift back into dad mode here in a minute. And it was great talking, and thank you so much for taking the time out of your day. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you
so much,
Paul.
for
I
having
really
us.
appreciate you reaching out.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Small Press Big Ideas. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to help the show, the best thing you can do is to tell a friend or colleague, and just take a few minutes to leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to right now. It only takes a minute out of your day, but it really does help the podcast grow and reach more ears. Check back for new episodes every Monday.